Built the plant in 53, Pike and Portsmouth DOE. U-235 in the groundwater chain, heavy metals drift with rain. They cracked the pipes, they dropped the shell, still denied what tests could tell. Open air, no tent in place, children sick, no public trace. Atomic corruption, filed it safe, never discussed. Paper trail burned to dust, you won't find what you won't trust. Atomic corruption, carried down the river bend, across the state, you can't pretend this don't poison in the end. Kids with cancer,
hello everybody, welcome back.
Dust in schools they never claimed. No
Always takes me a moment
test, no
to get up to
agency,
speed.
just buried deep bureaucracy. They said too costly to contain, but built a dirt dump across the drain. Green up CO2, same report filed. The fish are gone, blame climate change. Atomic corruption.
Just give me a minute, my apologies.
Still the isotopes don't stray. Bound air, not bound to say. Atomic corruption. They marked 5 counties in the plan. Laughed at Kentucky's open land. Told us hillbillies won't understand. Technetium track 14 miles, same as plants, same
Just a few problems. We're almost there.
Lawrence Livermore drew the lines, but DOE said never mind. Birth smell form, no press release, no
Hope everybody's
study
doing
done,
well
no
on
state
this
police. The
21
river
day
holds
of
what they won't name. Atomic corruption.
It's a song by James Lucid on YouTube. Filmmaker, he does all the film work and the music. Always takes the beginning of every show is just an absurd amount of work for some reason. It just never seems to change. Anyway, we're up and running. Hope you're doing well. That's possible. Righty, here we go. There's still a lot of headlines. I guess there will be for a while of Iran and Israel. We got to get to. They're not very far away. And if Iran doesn't get nuclear weapons, if they don't have nuclear weapons, I should say, they're going to end up just like Ukraine. Because, you know, if Ukraine had nuclear weapons, this wouldn't be happening, right? Zelensky, a single entity, has destroyed an entire country under the guise of saving a country. And they knew they were going to destroy the country because they evacuated 3 million people to countries worldwide that are a burden now to those countries. They sacrificed over 1 million people. If the head of Google, the previous head of Google, CEO Schwartz, makes 1 million drones a month and sells it to Ukraine for $400 each, so they can chase down some kid in a uniform and blow him up. What kind of society is this that these idiots and chicken necks have taken over our reality, our humanity? Should all nuclear plants surrounded by farms be closed to preserve human life? And a lot of people don't understand that the majority of nuclear plants are surrounded by farms. And that might seem incredible to some people, but that's part of the engineering of nuclear power plants, because you can't contain the radiation. And so shipping the food out is one way to poison everybody, and that seems to be the agenda. It's pretty hard to deny it. And there was this day where I started realizing, because you're dealing with nuclear so much, you start realizing that almost every nuclear power plant was surrounded by farms. And I was like, nah, that can't be. That can't be real. Unfortunately, it was all too real. Just let me walk you through the madness of that statement. And so I had this epiphany that almost every nuclear power plant is surrounded by farms. And now I said to myself, well, I got to go out and prove it, I guess, before I open my pie hole. Which wasn't very hard to prove at all. This is what evil looks like, grown food by a nuclear power plant. So as I started to look for high altitude pictures of nuclear plants, I came to the daunting realization, the absolute horror, that just about every nuclear power plant I could find, as far as I can see, was surrounded by farms. And the farms were always butted right up to the site. And so if you were trying, because it's not those stacks there that you're worried about, it's the tall, skinny stacks. And see how that tall, skinny stack happens to be close to the water too? It was quite a coincidence that every plant I looked at, without exception for the first day, was surrounded by farms. And of course then the question was, how bad will it get? So what's happening is the fuel pools are still splitting atoms. That they would, each reactor core, there could be, say, 4 reactor cores in each of the pools at the top of the boiling water reactor buildings. So you're talking about 4 reactor cores. So that's the power. They would be splitting atoms for 4 million homes, basically. But there's 2 of those pools at the top of the buildings. So you had the same amount of atoms as you would for 8 million homes, still being split, but now with no containment. And when you look at the studies, it was absurd amount of studies showing that this is a stupid idea. The best way to poison everybody is through the food source and their water, obviously, right? But radioactive water, so you got a farm right alongside of nuclear power plants, and then the nuclear power plant needs enormous amount of water. And a lot of time the farms are sucking that same water. Not only is being poisoned by radioactive fallout, it's being poisoned by the radioactive emissions going directly into the rivers, lakes, the streams, the ocean. Accumulation of radionuclides by plants is a monitoring system. So they're purposely poisoning everybody. This is the best way to move the radioactive fallout from the fuel pools away from the facilities. There's absolutely no illusions. This is what they were up to with that design. And that's one of the most frightening things you can imagine, because clearly they got decades upon you being aware of this. So they've been poisoning hundreds of millions, if not 1 billion at least, people a year through the food from the farms. Because you were talking about over 400 nuclear plants at one point. It's kind of hard to appreciate for a lot of people. I'm sure it is. Just bear with me again. I was just heartbroken that they hate you so much. So this, in order for this to happen, you got to realize this has been going on for a very long time, right? Let me give one more kick at this can here. And like sometimes I use some pictures regularly, but not like every day. So you try to tag them so you can find it in the enormous pile that you got. But this, some days you don't. Let's keep going. Still gonna try one more time. Here, I might get better luck with that one. How could I? What it is I got pictures of Sellafield by satellite. It's pretty amazing when you're looking at it through a satellite. Anyway, I got another way of doing it. It's kind of important, so just bear with me for 1 second. That's right, because I did put it in my oh shit pile that I use all the time, which is getting bigger and bigger every other day for all these years. I sure got a lot of shit in my oh shit pile, is all I can tell you. Alright, that's it here somewhere. Here we go. So like even the design of new nuclear plants in the United Kingdom, for instance, surrounded by farms. But when you look at a satellite picture of one of their oldest sites, the reprocessing site, even the reprocessing sites are surrounded by farms. And this is from a satellite. They have 1,000 buildings. It's very difficult to appreciate the scale. And they love putting it by the biggest aquifers, the national laboratories in particular. You'll notice the majority of them are situated right over the biggest aquifers in that part of the country. Was another just very disappointing. So it's a very dishonest, very deceitful, disingenuous, but a very dangerous industry when you look at those particular attributes. And I'm pretty sure that if you looked at any nuclear power plant from a satellite, you would get the same. And it's always right up to the site. Now, Sellafield, for instance, looks exactly like this. So the farmers are welcome to work there and grow all the food and everything else. And that food, by the way, is preferential food. A lot of that is used for pharmaceuticals. So you have radioactive pharmaceuticals. And it's also set to the biggest chains. And they know that was the worst scenario, is to have food grown alongside of these incredible emitters. And the amount I'm talking about is hard to wrap your mind around. It's a catastrophic amount from every single nuclear power plant. And the older the plant is, the more fuel it has in the fuel pools, which means the more emissions all day, every day is happening. There is no containment. And those tall, skinny stacks, they're hemorrhaging the radiation from the fuel pools and also from the incinerators on these sites. Every nuclear plant has an incinerator. But it is remarkable that that is engineered into the design of the plant. So the first question they got for a nuclear plant is, well, which farming area are we going to put this in? That's the engineer's first thought. And any renditions with a elevated view is going to include farms, even if they're not going to build it. Even if this is just a opinion or conjecture, like a speculation rather, they're still going to put farms in the background because that connotation is important to make you complacent, to make your loved ones, because you see it all your life, right? It's like The Simpsons, where at the beginning of every show you see Homer Simpson with a fuel rod, a simulation of a fuel rod landing in his hood. And he takes that, he's driving down the road with it, and then he throws it out the window. Right? And so the kids that are watching this are significantly influenced by those types of connotations. And then by proxy, they become desensitized to the incredible danger that would have posed in real life. Anybody comes that close contact to a piece of fuel will die right away. Their organs will melt right away. And there's no species that has an autoimmune trigger to defend against it. It's they have a sickness and a hateful sickness at that, and they have an agenda. They have an actual agenda to harm and kill people. And that's evident in the fact that they built all their nuclear power plants surrounded by farms. And in Japan, after 36 reactor cores melted down and were rejected right out of the buildings, 55 countries banned the food from 14 of the prefectures, half the country. And I remember the trolls came in when I first showed that picture, because that picture was with a story, and there was many stories for many months, were naming all of these prefectures that had banned the food, where the food was banned by 55 countries. They had picked up 30 million one-ton bags and 3% of the land in Japan. They're actually harvesting food within sight of the nuclear meltdowns, right alongside of millions of one-ton bags of radiation, in a field that was covered, where they picked up 2.5 centimeters, 1 inch of the topsoil, which is completely long after the event has happened, which means it's irrelevant. Like, it's going to be equivalent to getting about 2% of the radioactive fallout in that particular patch. And that's why you're seeing that poll tonight. Should all nuclear plants surrounded by farms be closed to preserve human lives? And that would be the end of the nuclear industry, because there would only be about 7, 8, 9 nuclear plants, power plants, that would remain open if you closed down every plant surrounded by farms. And these are very sick, sadistic, and demented and twisted people. Here we go, hopefully. I'm still a bit off here. Let me just fix that. Because sometimes to do the stuff that I'm doing, I have to mess with things. And YouTube doesn't make it easy to do anything, right? And of course, the nuclear industry itself, the troll itself machine, the nuclear industry, have 1,000 public relation firms out there gunning for you. Japan is currently running a program to denigrate the things I do and me personally, and to attack my reputation. It's called Operation Long Jump. It's an actual attack upon me in Canada, from the sanctioned by the Japanese government. They're so proud of it, they bragged about it on my shows calling in. They got a job, their job is to stop and disrupt the things I'm doing, rather than protect their friends and their families and their loved ones. It shows you the mentality of how stupid this industry actually is on top of that. But it also shows you the contempt that it has, that it would smear you, and not just like on the internet, in my own community. Literally every Facebook in this province has got propaganda come across their eyeballs that they don't realize, the majority of them, or do, about me, no doubt. CEO urges Japan government to expand electricity to fuel artificial intelligence. First off, Nvidia, why don't they just build their own geothermal plant? Why does the government / the taxpayers have to pay for a company's electricity? There's lots of wind projects and solar projects. Last year was 660 gigawatts, which is double the total capacity of 80 years of nuclear, came online in just 12 months of just solar. Why does the Japan government have to build something that the company should be building? Why do they think they have the incredible arrogance to come out and say that the country has to build their power supply so they can be successful? Like, in all honesty, that's how it should work, shouldn't it? Have you ever heard of anything like that before? I'm Dana, by the way. And you can call into these live shows here in Canada, if you're from United States, Canada, New Mexico. It's 709-589-4406. So the CEO of a chip manufacturing telling the Japanese government they have to expand electricity to meet that company's power demands. Not even that, their development. It's very strange stuff. Like, somewhere we lost the plot. And now we're into a territory where the corporations are telling the taxpayers they have to provide for the company. Or they won't be able to build an artificial intelligence system to regulate and monitor every facet of their lives forever. TEPCO makes progress towards Fukushima Daiichi decommissioning. The stories the propaganda never stops, in all honesty. The corporations now are the only people that matter. And they're actually people, right? They have human rights, which was illegal, which wasn't constitutional or in the Magna Cartas or the Bill of Rights. And what corporations had done in increments, I think it was 1938 or something, they had constitutional lawyers making applications to the constitutions and Magna Cartas and Bills of Rights to give corporations facets of the human rights. Not all of them, but important facets that would protect a corporation as a human protection. The original charter of a country would have been, they would describe where the company could exist, how many employees they could have, how big they can be. They would dictate rules and regulations. There would be prosecution for polluting the environment. In fact, the companies would be liquidated and the assets sold off. The bosses, the owners would be put in jail as a deterrent, not to be criminal. And the assets, once they're liquidated, would have been used to pay restitution and outstanding bills. And when you gave them human rights, you took away that checks and balances. Now we no longer have a checks and balances. And it was Justice Hugo Black from the United States Supreme Court, one of the Supreme Court justices at the time, had wrote an eloquent dissent saying how absurd it was that a law meant to protect, and the law that they piggybacked in on was the slavery law for the blacks. And he said how absurd it was that a law meant to free people from an oppressive government was now being used by corporations to oppress the sovereign people, the entire population. And because no one's seen it coming, people, you got to be a constitutional lawyer basically to appreciate it, and you had to know it was actually happening. And now we're at a point where corporations, like the ones that are on the stock exchange, so Mark Zuckerberg can't go to jail, they can get a big fine. But because they're a corporate person, they don't pay taxes. They put that money in offshore accounts. So when they get a big fine, they take a tiny fraction of the money they didn't pay in taxes. So they don't pay state, federal, provincial taxes, say in Canada's province, in America's states, and British. So there's no incentive whatsoever to be evil and to poison and destroy the communities wherever they set up their shops. And now we're at this point now where they have all the rights and we have none. Just like the Supreme Court Justice Hugo Black was so worried about. He wrote an eloquent dissent in 1938. And TEPCO, which is not a decommission authority, is now allowed to poison humanity. And another caveat to that is so the International Atomic Energy Agencies, the nuclear industries, the lobbying groups don't get the blame for what the nuclear industry has done. They'll take the credits for everything that the public somehow accepts, but they won't take the blame for any harm. Right? It was your fault. You let them exist. So shut up, basically, is what they're saying to you. TEPCO makes progress towards Fukushima decommissioning. This story has been pumped a lot in the last 2 weeks. TEPCO has discharged the first 7 Elps treated water releases for 2025, about 54,000 tons. Now, these tanks are empty. These tanks were built to manipulate people into thinking that they were able to deal with the water they were pouring over nuclear meltdowns. It simply doesn't work that way. And that you can fill up all of these tanks with a single typical reactor 6 times each day. Because each reactor needs 4,500 tons, a million gallons a minute. And even then, it's hard for people to comprehend the significance of that amount each day. 4,500 tons. So think about, you park your car across the road when you get home at night. You don't leave to work till 9 a.m. the next morning. But from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. each day, each minute, there's 4,500 one-ton pickup trucks of water being transported to each reactor at the local nuclear plant. And so every minute, you got 4,500 one-ton pickup trucks go past your house. So and each site got more than one reactor, but a single reactor is 4,500 tons of water a minute. To stop it from getting out of control. Once it's out of control, they're going to need even more water. And so a normal operating nuclear plant would fill up to 1,000 tanks. Not that they have 1,000 on the site. We've only been able to count 750 if you include the small tanks. But don't let a good lie go to waste. So the scenario was they needed to manipulate you into thinking they had it under control, and they built these tanks. But even if the tanks were 6 feet thick lead, you're talking about the acknowledged contamination is 2.2 sieverts per liter of just beta. You can't have just beta, you got to have alphas and gammas and neutrons. If you mix them all together in the tank, that stuff settles on the bottom, you have a chain reaction, melts a hole through the tank. Like Mayak, for instance. The tanks were built to lull you into complacency, and that seemed to work really well for the majority of the population. 99.9% of the population, actually. As the discharge continued, tanks no longer needed will be dismantled. Well, you're talking about 2.2 sieverts per liter going into these tanks. So now each piece of the tank would be about 100 sieverts after you drain the tank. The metal is contaminated. It's imbued, embedded with the incredible radiation. Let me just give you a quick example. I just got too much on my computer, right? We've been at this for so long. Well, it's actually 2.2 sieverts for that same story when you read the whole story. 2,000 millisieverts is... So they're only acknowledging beta, BETA. There's gammas, alphas, neutrons, and betas, and by proxy then there's X-rays. And so you're talking about 8-10 sieverts at least per liter. So if you put that into a tank, you're talking about at least 4 million sieverts in a tank. 3 to 5 sieverts is a lethal dose walking past it. So you won't be able to build another tank on site because even if there were 6 feet thick lead shield around each tank, you still couldn't walk past it. And all of them are connected by pipes. So the story is completely absurd to suggest that this is real. So if you do drain the water from these tanks, and you can't filter that stuff, you are not filtering 2.2 sieverts of just beta. You can't have just betas. You got to have alphas, neutrons. In other words, you can't do that because you're going to have a meltdown right away in each liter. Because you can't mix neutrons and betas and gammas and alphas without some kind of a way of stopping the chain reaction. So it's simply not happening. Now, if you put all this in a filter, and if you're filtering this kind of stuff, imagine what the numbers are going to be like after 20 minutes in the filter. It's going to be thousands of sieverts. You can't get back into the water filtration facilities. And I have entire presentations just on that facet, showing you endless, and I mean endless documentation. You'll find it in my playlist. Detailed documentation of everything I'm talking about. Elps treated water refers to the water that had come into contact with the radioactive material inside the Fukushima Daiichi reactor building, and then treat it. How are you going to treat it? You can't filter. Cesium, and then you can't filter uranium. You can't filter plutonium separately, for starters. Okay, because all the atoms are the same size. You can't just filter one and magically not filter the other ones. So the bioaccumulation is going to be so enormous immediately, and the documentation of that is clear. The French system, the Areva system, wasn't even turned on. The Elps system wasn't completed until 2015. They didn't even start building it until 2013. And in 2013, all the tanks were full. Not from wells around the site, but from a giant aquifer underneath the Reactor 4 building in particular. So this is a story that came out in 2013 from BBC, Rupert Winfield Hayes. And TEPCO also in the video, this short video, acknowledges that the water is completely out of control. They have no control whatsoever. This is 2013. If you're not going to believe me, you can believe TEPCO themselves, maybe.
Fukushima plant sits smack in the middle of an underground aquifer. Deep beneath the ground, the site is rapidly being overwhelmed by water. Beneath the surface, water flows downhill and into the basement of the damaged reactor buildings. There it is contaminated with high levels of radiation. To stop the groundwater flowing on into the nearby ocean, engineers are building an underground barrier. But that is causing the groundwater level to rapidly rise. It's now so high the water will soon reach the surface. Then it will start flowing overground into the sea. This week, the company that owns Fukushima, TEPCO, made this disturbing admission.
We understand that this water discharge is beyond our control, and we do not think the current situation is good.
Outside experts say it's now clear TEPCO is incapable of handling the cleanup at Fukushima. It's time for the Japanese government to step in. The situation is already beyond what TEPCO can handle, he says. If it were possible to take proper measures, they would have done it already. It's not as if TEPCO is refusing to do what they can. They're doing everything they can, but there are no perfect solutions. Even if the government does step in, it's not clear what it can do. The only other solution is to pump out the contaminated groundwater and put it in storage tanks. But after just 2 years, the site is already jammed with more than 1,000 giant tanks. Most of them are already full up. At least 400 tons of new water pours into the site every day, and it's going to continue for years and years. Fukushima's water crisis has only just begun. Rupert Wingfield-Hayes, BBC News in Tokyo.
So he's telling you clearly they have no control, right? Let me go back to TEPCO here.
Disturbing admission.
We understand that this water discharge is beyond our control, and we do not think the current situation is good.
Outside experts say it's now clear TEPCO is incapable of handling the cleanup at Fukushima. It's time for the Japanese government to step in. The situation is already beyond what TEPCO can handle, he says. If it were possible to take proper measures, they would have done it already. It's not as if TEPCO is refusing to do what they can. They're doing everything they can, but there are no perfect solutions.
Well, they don't know what they're doing. They're not decommissioning authorities. They don't have a friggin' clue. The reason they're there is so you blame TEPCO instead of the nuclear industries, which is the proper place to put the blame. It's particularly the degenerate, disgusting International Atomic Energy Agency. The scum of the scum. This was primarily due to rainwater, groundwater mixing. Really. That had come into contact with molten nuclear fuel. Now, they were saying they were pumping out 120 tons a day. That's equal to a garden hose split 4 ways. It's equivalent to pissing on the reactors. By 2023, the figure had decreased to 80 cubic meters a day. You're talking about stuff that was burning at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. This stuff doesn't need oxygen to burn. And when you look at the pictures, the reactors, I mean, the whole story is insane. They have so many laws, they can't keep up with it. I can barely keep up with it. I created this video back in 2013. This is just 4 of the endless journalists. By the way, that's Rupert Wingfield-Hayes up the top right-hand corner. That's the same year as the other video I just showed you. Now he's claiming he's at the top of a building that doesn't even exist. This is the same guy. It's a short video. Here you go.
Where I'm standing is on top of what used to be
Reactor
building number 4. The whole of this building was blown apart by a huge explosion.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011.
Of the decommissioning work taking place here in Reactor 4.
At the end of our tour, we were checked for radiation exposure. In 4 hours, I received the equivalent of less than a chest x-ray.
1,500 highly radioactive fuel rods inside this pool. They've got to move them outside of this reactor.
So, that's acceptable. That's okay. Calling him a scumbag, though, I'm going to get censored for it. If I say it's outrageous, I'm going to be censored for it. Or I might even get blacklisted on many sites. They might even take my video down. If I wasn't so stubborn and doing it so much. They got no one to pick on. They don't got anybody to pick on. Nobody else has ever... There's no... outside of a small group, there's like 5 of us talking about it. And I think there's like 2 other people that played the video once or twice. It's the most important video in history because they're pretending they're on top of the building to your left, 150 feet above the stump of the building to your left, which is 9 reactor cores that have melted down. Like, remember, Chernobyl was a very tiny reactor compared to these reactors. It was a graphite reactor. But Chernobyl was still brutal. I mean, they closed 9,400 farms in Ireland, Scotland, United Kingdom. And they closed a freshwater fishery in Sweden for 30 years because of Chernobyl, for instance. Still can't eat the reindeer in Latvia. The milk in Africa is still contaminated. But imagine closing down 9,400 farms 3,000 kilometers away, and each reactor at Fukushima is equal to 100 Chernobyls. And Fukushima had another attribute Chernobyl didn't have. It had decades of reactor cores stored at the top of the buildings that don't exist anymore. Each reactor core is equal to 100 Chernobyls. There's 36 reactor cores missing at Fukushima. Because you can't smell it, you can't perceive it. But it's okay to be monsters. That's perfectly fine. They're still out there being monsters every day. They're all making at least close to $1 million a year. And we went out and verified that, by the way. But here I am trying to tell the story for a very long time. It seems like I've been doing it now for 1,000 years. It's a very complicated, convoluted, difficult story to articulate on top of that without an absurd amount and high-quality systems to make it all work. And the new little computer that we now have permanently situated here is such a blessing. I don't know how the hell I ever made it this far without it. I really don't. Just what a difference that has made. It's just unbelievable. It was like you were missing your arm and you didn't know you were supposed to have an arm there, and then all of a sudden you got an arm. You're like, holy shit, this is great. It's such a relief for me. Radioactive materials except tritium, an element commonly presented in nature, are removed. Also at Fukushima Daiichi, TEPCO begins the second trial of retrieval of fuel debris. When they tell a lie, they just stack them up as high as they can get it before it tips over on top of you and your loved ones. So this is a sample. They say is the size of a grain of a raisin. I'm sorry, they changed the. James Lucid actually put out a song about the raisin, which is so appropriate. But the original story was it was the size of a grain of rice, not the size of a raisin. Not that makes a big difference in the scale of things. But I guess they came to their senses. I don't know who wrote the original story. Probably the International Atomic Energy Agency. And so they got these people there. Why do you get your faces hid? And the people behind them, their faces are not hid. But why would you hide the faces? Because none of these people have a nuclear degree that are sat there with their faces. They were hired right off the streets. And they were given lots of money and an important job. They don't know what a reactor is. They don't know that it's fake. They don't know that the building is actually gone. A nuclear scientist would, a nuclear academic would, see? And so these are just your probably homeless and destitute and victims of society, because that's what they usually hire for all the jobs there, who don't understand the idiot machine. They spent $40 million on this robot. Calling it a robot means you're actually just as stupid as I am, because I call it a robot, so don't feel bad. And then they have these tongs. And November, they lowered the tongs. It takes a week to get it out there and get it to the bottom, and 5 or 6 days to bring it back up. And you got to hope there's something in the tong. And they spent $40 million on it and worked with Britain, Sellafield, and everybody else in the United Kingdom to develop this incredibly sophisticated robot that's designed to exist in high radiation areas, when chopsticks would have been just as good. Why don't you just put duct tape on it? Like put 10 feet of duct tape on each one of those black bars and just lower it down there. When it hits the floor, bring it back up, and you have all the samples you fucking need for the next 100 years. Now I can't say the word fucking. That got me censored now. But they can go out and pretend they're on top of the building. They're not going to get censored on their YouTube channels. They're going to get quite the opposite. they're going to get millions and millions of views over 2 or 3 years. And that it'll never stop. But why not put a vacuum cleaner on this contraption so you can get all your samples at one time? Why not put duct tape on it? Why not put some magnets on it? Why not put a jelly donut on it and just go down and dip that into the surface and come back up? You get a lot more than this. You ever see those games where you can walk into the shops and have these games and get these stuffed toys in there? And that's the same contraption, right? Where you lower it down, you got to grab a stuffed toy and you got to bring it over and drop it down in the slot, and then you can reach down and get a stuffed toy. That's the same contraption. It's the same contraption. And you only get one grip. If you don't get the stuffed toy on that grip, you end up with nothing. And why are their faces hid? Where's the outrage over the propaganda, the death of our species, or whales, or birds, or insects because of the radioactive fallout from Japan? In seawater near the Elps treated water discharge, what are you talking about treat it? How are you going to treat multiple sieverts per liter? How are you going to treat that? It doesn't work that way. The pipes, you won't be able to walk over the pipes that is carrying the water. Once you turn the system on, and Areva acknowledges that, and let me bring it up and finish it off, I guess. Because if not, then it's not true. If I don't show you the evidence, it's not true, because my word is not good enough. If I pretend I'm on top of a building, then my word is gold. If I pretend I'm in the fuel pool of Reactor 4 that doesn't even exist, then my word is gold. I can get a job at the White House Press Club, right? And that's what they did. And it's blowing gale force down here. It's blowing gale force down here. Probably can't hear it, hopefully, on your side. Here we go. The whole story is insane. It's just insane. Like they told so many lies, they have to make up lies to cover the lies they've already told. That's totally acceptable. That's completely normal. That's so. TEPCO 2014, April the 21st. The dates are important in what I'm going to show you. The Advanced Liquid Processing Systems, Elps, has yet to function reliably. Well, it wasn't, they only started building it in 2013. They didn't have it finished until 2015. But August the 12th, much later that same year, TEPCO 2 abandoned the Areva system, was the exact replica of the Elps system. For the last 3 years, the system was already built, unused, and kept out of operation. So they kept you on the hook about the Elps system and Areva. The bypass operation was not having any effect on Fukushima. That's where they're going to direct the water around the site from the mountain. They're going to build a fence. It's going to cost $1 billion. You can't build a fence to stop radiation. It doesn't. Radiation is, you know, you put 2 million atoms on the head of a needle, you can't see it. And each atom matters. TEPCO's ice wall operation not meeting expectations. You can't make the temperatures low enough. They admit that the ice wall will not stop the groundwater from entering the building. They allegedly had 260,000 people work on an ice wall at the nuclear meltdown itself, which is, it's absurd to suggest it, because you're talking about 260,000 a day paper suits. You can't account for it. And, you know, we mocked him for many years, and he finally came out with a story saying he burned 7,000 paper suits because they had 7,000 people on the site. But the logistics of course, paper suit is useless at a nuclear meltdown, But the logistics of 260,000 people, just the toilets, just the lunchrooms, just the hard hats, right? There's all this evidence that doesn't exist to support that assertion. And that if you paid everybody, the 260,000 people, $1,100 a day, or total, there wasn't enough money left over to build the ice wall or a wall or anything else, because the money would have went to the employees. So that's simply not true, right? So why would we tell those type of lies? What is the catalyst for telling the lies? But the effectiveness is doubtful because there is no ice wall. A total of 260,000 people have worked on creating the wall. But what are you talking about? Like, telling lies is just, they tell so many lies they can't keep up with it. We collect it, and then when we see discrepancies, we can bring it into focus better. Everything is out of control. Of course it is. It's 36 reactor cores melted down at the one time over a 5-day period. Each building had 9 reactor cores, 8 in the fuel pools and 1 in the reactor. And reactor 4 had 9 in the fuel pools because they were doing maintenance. But there's a lot of evidence suggesting the reactor, because typically they don't take all the fuel out of the reactor core. Let's keep her rolling anyway. 58 JAIF Annual Conference, Fukushima Daiichi Decommissioning, and Local Recovery. And barely any, they darken up the area, not because of the screens, but because there's nobody in the seats. There's very, very few people there whatsoever. Maybe a dozen people, and they got all these empty seats. Efforts towards local recovery and revitalization. You can't recover after a nuclear meltdown because everything's covered in radioactive fallout. Key initiatives were presented in 5 categories. Removal of the spent fuel from the storage pool. Like the industry is insane. How else could you describe an industry like this besides insane? So reactor 3 ejected the reactor core and the fuel pools right out of the buildings. Reactor 1 ejected the fuel pool right out of the building. Reactor 3 and 4 clearly are gone. These buildings don't exist anymore. The fuel pools are gone. And where did they go? They only covered the entire planet in 23 days. This is the French government's model. And on the 15th, every academic on the planet, on day 5, every academic on the planet, when they seen that picture, because that was distributed worldwide, every person on the planet would have seen that picture that was paying attention. So they all knew the fuel pools were gone. Like, if just one of these detonate, you can't get near the rest of them. But they need water to circulate, minimum. They need an enormous amount of water, right? They need 1 million gallons a minute, 4,500 tons a minute. But they also need water to circulate right away, or after 50 minutes it's going to start melting down. Once that starts, because it doesn't need oxygen, the pressure is going to build up and then eventually it'll detonate. These were steam explosions, steam excursions, where the steam heated up. It went from 1,000 pounds per square inch to 2,000, 2,500 pounds per square inch, and that's the detonation that you're seeing. But when there's a spark introduced, which is typical of an explosion like this, because you got all this metal and everything just letting go, so you got a spark shows up, just metal hitting metal, and that'll detonate the hydrogen buildup. The hydrogen buildup is from the meltdown that's going on, but that was in the containment. But the fuel pools at the top of the buildings have the same kind of attributes with the pressure system. So they knew it was going to melt down. There was no illusions that this was going to melt down. And on the 16th, the day after this story, the mainstream media was panicking, and they pulled on the panic trigger. And so they came out and announced with Frank von Hippel that there was at least 8 reactor cores at the top of the buildings in the fuel pools.
And if, in terms of what we know about the capacity, about how many fuel rods would likely be inside that reactor, what sort of quantity are we talking about radioactivity?
I've heard different numbers ranging from 2 to 15 reactor cores worth. No, 2 to about 8 reactor cores worth.
So if it can't be controlled, that's worst case scenario, 8 reactors worth of radioactivity.
Right. Right.
And it would be released into the atmosphere.
Radioactivity. By the way, the fact that this has happened at unit number 4 is understandable and is consistent with the theory that it really did dry out because the fuel from the unit number 4 was most recently discharged.
Okay.
And therefore,
and so reactor 4 is the one to your right. Unfortunately, it was Maddock who, or whatever her face is, who was interviewing him, but it doesn't. She doesn't matter. Frank von Hippel matters, right? And because that's evidence, it's very important evidence, and the buildings were 40 years old, so they had 4 decades of reactor cores at the top of the buildings. So it's a very important facet to the. So most people think of a nuclear meltdown as a single reactor. We're talking about 9 reactors at the top of each of these buildings. And so it doesn't, because it's the mainstream media, for the average person, that's really important evidence, okay? And I get it that a lot of people don't like her, and I'm definitely no fan of her. And when I seen what she'd done after the coronavirus, it was impossible to have any respect ever. So there is no fuel pools. But see, they run all of these programs to reinforce the propaganda, to reinforce that 14-year-old lie. But they've made a lot of mistakes along the way, right? And we're able to capitalize on that to show you this discrepancy, which is so important. On the topic of the Elps treated water, well, you can't treat that. So I forgot to finish that up for you. I happen to have that already ready to go. TEPCO sent a press release July the 1st, 2013. They're planning to attempt to operate the Elps system by September of that year, 2013. So this was July. So in July 2013, this was a picture they released. The Elps Decontamination system is under construction. Well, that's not under construction. The building is under construction, but the system is not. In September 2013, they came out and acknowledged that and I showed you a video from 2013, by the way, right? Where they said they had no control over the water whatsoever. Don't forget that one. Don't forget this one. They chose not to stop the water in 2011 over fears for their stock prices. So the original accident, the most catastrophic moments, everything went directly into the ocean. They didn't try to stop it. They worried about their shares. All right. Move ahead to August 9, 2014. And they say the disaster site has struggled with water decontamination for years and announced they think they finally have the Elps decontamination system operational. That's August, right? Now, it turns out it was 2015 before they announced they had it finished. So they had all the tanks refilled, as I showed you in the video earlier, in 2013 from the aquifers underneath the reactor 4. They had at least 9 reactor cores at the top of each of the buildings, and as I showed you, they don't exist anymore. And that the Alps system, what they're claiming now is where they're releasing water, everything is treated through an Alps system. Same as the Riva system, simply they didn't exist. They couldn't filter. You can't filter water that is that radioactive. And I can show you an absurd amount of documentation on this subject. We're not going to do that to you. I'm not that mean. I'll keep her rolling here. Another rough day. It's always better if you can get a show in, right? And if you try to challenge every one of their lies, you'll never get through very much news in each cycle, each day. The hydrogen explosions of Fukushima 1 and 3 as a fear like they've never before. So they like to get your attention drawn away from what's really going on. That's what they're doing there. Stresses some areas even today remains under evacuation orders. Like it's a nuclear wasteland that's still melting down. And then the person they're interviewing originally came from France, now lives in Okuma. So clearly they don't, and runs a farm. So these are not very smart people. These are morons. Like you're a moron. If you live in Okuma, that's because you're a moron. No offense to you, you don't have full faculties, but you're a moron. You're the definition of what a moron is. You're right alongside of multiple nuclear meltdowns. You're in a place where there's 14 million one-ton bags of radiation stored. If that doesn't make you a moron, what does, I wonder? That's the I'm invisible complex is what we're talking about. It's absurd that they have any attributes that are useful whatsoever, particularly to a story that's so important. And they're in a nuclear wasteland and they run a farm in a nuclear wasteland. They're put on a pedestal so that they feel important because somebody with a camera showed up and interviewed them and they're going to be in a newspaper, so they're important. They have a moral high ground in their compartmentalized or little box fantasy world they live in. And you'll see that particular attribute with the employees of the nuclear industry. Even the students coming out of university will have this God complex. Because, we covered this young university student a little while back. And she was putting out TikTok videos and YouTube videos saying it was like a banana and it's like a potato chip, it's like walking in sunshine. And had this incredible enthusiasm that only a young student just out of school and going to university would have, right? This blind faith. And the industry was pushing her out, and still is, pushing her out there to millions of people each time. She was the perfect useful idiot who didn't know any better. And very unusual for me, I went in and spammed her with some useful stuff. And the minute she checks out one of them, and you know how a young student is like, they'll check out a few of them, all of a sudden they can never take that out of the equation again. They can keep pretending, but they won't have that enthusiasm anymore, I can guarantee you. Survey finds ignorance and fear surrounding nuclear cleanup in Parks Township. She done the survey. The zero brains. A report from a University of Pittsburgh public health graduate student has found lingering information gaps and distrust surrounding the Army Corps of Engineer planned cleanup at a Parks Township nuclear waste dump. So she gets injected in there because a real scientist would rather not be on camera. There's a very intense fear when they're telling such a big whopper, and very intense fear around the site, and people have stuck to that, said Ariana Scott. That's genius right here, Einstein Jr. right there. A Leechburg native who will graduate in May after successfully defending her thesis on remediation. Well, how are you going to claw back all the radioactive fallout from this community? How are you going to get that of all the insects and birds and mammals and trees and plants? Do you really think it's contained to a small area that they own? Do you really think the radiation don't migrate out of that site? Do you really think there's a barrier? There's a moral code for the radiation that's not going to leave the site? And successfully defending her thesis. And the idea of those types of connotations is to get the local people who probably know her saying, oh, well, I trust her. You know, she grew up and she used to go to school with my kid, or she used to be the cheerleader for the local high school. And people become disenfranchised from reality because they have that little connection. Parks Township nuclear waste dump. So when you get the words nuclear waste dump, and they're going to spend $1 billion to clean it up, like when you're going to spend $1 billion to clean up something, it's because it's a catastrophic nightmare there. They're not doing it because they want to do it. They're doing it because the rabbit is out of the hat. In the 60s and 70s, the Nuclear Material and Equipment Corporation, Newmark, buried 10 trenches, unlined trenches, worth of radioactive waste. What do you mean worth of? What are you talking about? How many tons? How many? 40,000, 45-gallon drums? What's the number? No, they just dumped it right into the ground. When you hear trenches, it's because they dumped it down into the ground. Known by the federal agency as the shallow land disposal. Shallow land disposal. So it's not even, it only has a very small amount of topsoil put on top of it, basically. At least it's the worst case scenario, because drums will rot in that time frame, right? Because, you know, you're talking about over 50 years, right, of stuff sitting in the ground. This stuff is now distributed to all the aquifers and everything else. Buried 10 trenches worth of radioactive material. What's in a trench? To rid itself of enriched uranium. Enriched uranium. Enriched. Like military grade. Where each atom will trigger an autoimmune response in your body that you don't have. You'll have no autoimmune trigger to defend against it. So your body will attack it. Every atom, and you put 200 million atoms on the head of a needle, and the children and the horses and the birds and the bees and everything else, their bodies attack it with white blood cells for the rest of their lives, eventually building a tumor around it. But because you're producing a prolific amount of white blood cells perpetually, because it's in your body, it's pulsing energy at the speed of light in every direction each second. That's reckoned just millions of chromosomes and DNA in cells. Your body tries to repair that every second. It can't keep up with it. And it's not just going to be one. Yeah, shallow trenches, Albert. That's right. And other harmful materials. Really, at a nuclear dump site. Enriched uranium. Enriched uranium sees the key. Oh, and radioactive this and radioactive. But don't worry about that, because you need to worry about the enriched uranium. You're talking about catastrophic contamination. Like, the whole focus should be on the fact that there's enriched uranium. Do you see the big fuss that is made over Iran having enriched uranium? And so they'll try to say, well, you know, terrorists are going to go there and steal it and make a dirty bomb or something, right? That's the distraction. They'll keep you fighting over nonsense. What that means is you contaminated long distances, is incredibly contaminated. It's just, we're talking about catastrophic radiation. That's what they're going to spend $1 billion there. Well, first off, 90% of it is going to be stolen. 69% said they were confident in the safety of the government cleanup. They weren't confident in the safety of the government cleanup. You're 50 years late. How are you going to clean up something that's been going on for 50 years? You're going to claw back the radioactive pollen for the last 50 years? You're going to claw back all the water tables, all the rainfalls that wash through that site, that shallow trench? A shallow trench? Like, my goodness, boy. But don't worry, because Miss Scott done a thesis that it could be remediated. How are you going to claw back 50 years of emissions that have already escaped the site? And the survey was open between June and August to anyone who lived within a 5-mile radius of the dump. Well, like, the sirens are always put within 10 miles of a nuclear site because radioactive fallout, first, it should be within 100 square miles, or 100 miles in any direction, rather, because radiation is not heavy, it's tiny. Radiation is the only emission that can float around the entire planet. And there's nothing on the planet has an autoimmune trigger to defend against it. So it's a violent reaction in your body, immediately sustained for the rest of your life, until you eventually build a tumor around it. Congress gave the Army Corps the responsibility of remediating the site in 2002, over 23 years ago. They still haven't done anything. Several structures, which tells you how bad it really is, several structures have gone up in recent months, including a laboratory. They don't give it the prominence of calling it a laboratory, a lab. A wastewater treatment plant. This is not wastewater, this is radioactive water. It's completely different. Daylight to dark difference. Radiation is lethal to everything with replicating cells. Wastewater is stuff that comes out of your sewage. It's completely inappropriate to use that connotation, that framing. It's expected to take 7 years and cost about $500 million. Yeah, okay. You mean $1 billion, right? Because that's what happens with every one of these sites. There's never enough money for these super funds. Turner and Townsend, NPX, partnered on pursuit of nuclear projects across Canada. So they show up, they can do whatever they want. There's no checks and balances. They have no intentions of being responsible or sincere or genuine. Their entire legacy is predicated upon deceit and dishonesty and deception, misrepresentation. The next Superfund site right there, look. Wherever there's fresh water, they love to destroy it as quick as they can, on top of that. And these are, the spots they're talking about is the Great Lakes, the third biggest freshwater aquifer on the entire planet. The third biggest freshwater aquifer, and they're going to put another disease factory, a massive disease factory on its shorelines. Nuclear energy offers a proven path to decarbonization. What are you talking about? It's the most resource-intensive industry, period. By a stretch on top of that. Like just getting the fuel is up. The amount of carbon the amount of resources dwarfs any other industry. It's the dirtiest industry in human history, and to call it decarbonization, every time I hear that word, it's very frustrating because that's the United Nations military-industrial complex, as Eisenhower called them, the New World Order, according to George Bush Sr. Canada has potential to add 30 gigawatts of new nuclear capacity by 2050. Has the potential. And the problem with nuclear, and particularly if you're talking 30 gigawatts in Canada, what are you talking about? That's absurd to even suggest it. And the thing about nuclear is you can't assimilate renewables into that same electricity system. And so that's one of the sort of you can never put renewable in that area again unless you build new technology, because they're not the lines that they're going to build for these sites won't work with the renewable system. I mean, last year it was 660 gigawatts in 12 months of solar itself rather came online. Well, Canada's a lost cause. It's been corrupted since the late 40s. The universities were taken over in the early 50s by the nuclear industry. It's been a nuclear slave. The entire country has been a slave to the nuclear industry ever since. And these are the worst people you'll ever come across. You meet these people and you'll be like, what the freak was that? That was the weirdest chicken neck I ever come across. To help meet its net zero targets is simply not true. It has the potential, but the word potential, to add up to 30 large nuclear power plants is what they're talking about. Really, Canada. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if they done it, don't get me wrong. But why would Canada want that? Geothermal, anything nuclear can do far, far into the future, geothermal can do this year. Why would you look at anything but geothermal? Geothermal is cheaper. You can put double the energy for half the price. Well, it's harder to steal the money from the geothermal than it is from the nuclear. 90% of the money in the nuclear industry goes to the administration. In other words, it goes down the black hole, never to be seen again. Another hard day. Sleep all day. Get up, work on the show. Sleep for hours. Wake up. I'm recovering. It's been a rough decade. All the research expeditions, they basically finished me off, right? That was the enemy. Coming to the East Coast was the enemy. Now I got Operation Long Jump going at me. And so I can do the things I can do. Doing these shows is important because you need another narrative besides the nightmare nuclear industry's narrative. Iran accuses Israel of trying to undermine nuclear talks with the United States. This was Iran accuses Israel of trying to undermine nuclear talks with the United States. There's an understatement. A kind of coalition is forming to determine and disrupt the diplomatic process. Well, Israel doesn't accept the fact that Iran most likely is a nuclear weapons country. They're insane if they're not. They're going to end up just like Ukraine if they don't have nuclear weapons. And I think that's the only reason they haven't been flattened like Afghanistan and Iraq and Syria. Because they do have nuclear weapons. They're just not public about it. Neither is Israel, right? It's kind of leaked out, but they still won't admit it themselves that they have illegal nuclear weapons. They're still not part of any treaties. And, they're carrying out a genocide right in front of everybody's eyes, and everybody's living in denial. They're targeting children on top of that. And they're disconnected. It's a disconnected society. It lives in a fantasy. And if it attacks Iran, its fantasy is not going to save them. I can tell you that much. Iran's going to, if they attack Iran's nuclear site, and this is what the connotations we're seeing for the last week steady, long before, but particularly the last week, Iran's going to attack their nuclear facility before Israeli planes land. So Israeli planes go down, they come in through Iraq, and they go over and attack the nuclear plants and sites, cause radiological contamination of the entire planet. Before those planes land, though, that are attacking Iran, Iran's going to take out Israel's nuclear bomb fleet and their nuclear plants, Damoa and everything else, right? And they're going to take out all the infrastructure in Israel on the first wave. They're going to overwhelm Israel's... Israelis' Iron Dome is not made to handle sophisticated drones. It's not made to handle Scud missiles and supersonic missiles, right? It's meant to handle Hamas's rockets that were designed by the Israelis. Hamas only exists because Israel needed someone to demonize. They didn't want to deal with the Palestinians, so they let Hamas show up, right? And Ron Paul will tell you they were funded by the United States, for goodness sakes, and Israel. Israel can kill endless Palestinians, but can't seem to kill the Hamas. What does that tell us? Israel was able to keep 5.5 million refugees out for 40 years, over 40 years now, from returning, but they can't kill Hamas. Something suspicious there, isn't it? But Israel can sustain 1,000+ sophisticated drones, Scud missiles, and supersonic missiles. daily. And they'll take out all of Israel and the United States and Britain and France's countries that are supporting them in the Middle East, like Qatar. Qatar will be wiped out in about 6 hours. Iran's good to go. They don't want to. Who would, right? But they're not going to be sitting down. They have nuclear weapons. And they got Russia and they got China. So they got a formidable opposition ready to go, good to go. And that the jet fighters, the American jet fighters that the Israelis are using, because they can't build anything on their own, is going to get painted up the minute it crosses the Iraqi border. We all know that's true. They really are a gutless society, though, aren't they? And Prime Minister Polak, Benjamin something, we don't know, Netanyahu's not his real name. He's a Polak, right? He changed his name when he went to Israel to sound more Jewish. Has long insisted that Israeli will not allow Iran to possess nuclear weapons. It was too late for that. Like 2015 was 9 years ago, man. You really think that they're going to sit on their fingers because you told them to? Give your fucking head a shake, boy. And when it falls off, give it a kick. Better yet, send it to me, I'll give it a kick. And has been vocally opposed to any talks that don't lead Iran to agree on a Libyan-style agreement, under which Tehran's entire nuclear program, both military and civilian, would be dismantled completely. That's not going to happen, you retard. You moron. You really think Iran's going to give up its nuclear? Are you stupid? It's like telling Israel to give up their nuclear weapons. You really think that would happen? If Iran gives up their nuclear, they're going to be just like Ukraine. Right? You know I'm right. Then the propaganda machine's out full swing. Like, I've been reading these headlines for decades. Iran can produce a nuclear bomb probably within 3 to 7 days, said Trita, the founder of National Iranian American Council. But that's pro-Israeli. That's a pro-Israeli paper, see? They're the National Iranian American Council. In other words, they're just a demonization machine that gets front page on Google's search engine. That's all. Israel may prefer war over peace. Give your friggin' head a shake. Israel can't win the war against Iran. Iran will flatten all of Israel's infrastructure in day one. It's all gone. Every bit of it. They'll have no fresh water, no electricity. They'll have no wharf. They'll have no port. It's a very tiny country. Israel has everything picked out. And the first 1,000 drones and missiles don't take it out. The next ones will. Israel won't last 2 days. You do all the damage to Iran, but they're determined that if you destroy their country, you're not getting away with it. And I guarantee you, because I've been following it. I'm not picking sides, I'm saying that's a fact. The veteran Middle East analyst warned that Iran is edging dangerously close to nuclear weapon capabilities. And of course they are. They're idiots if they don't. No, I don't like any of them have nuclear, don't get me wrong. The radioactive fallout covers the whole planet in about 7 days, minimum 20. But I'm not going to have a blind eye for a political agenda. I can guarantee you the evidence is clearly in support of what I'm saying. That's the fact. And Iran's not after committing genocide on top of that. Trump administration proposes making Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant neutral territory for United States control. So, first off, how are you going to make it neutral territory when Russia has it? Second off, how come Russia hasn't assassinated shithead? Zelensky. If anybody deserves to be assassinated, it's that guy. With the construction, Missouri unleashes a nuclear shockwave. It's hard not to hate this industry, isn't it? Building America's most powerful university reactor to stun the nation. Nuclear shockwave, stun the nation. And they're talking about a university. Redefined campus research power. Whoever wrote that story should go get their braces off and never be allowed to write for that idiot machine again. Oh, of course, next-gen nuclear research reactor poised to become the most powerful university reactor in the United States thanks to a groundbreaking partnership with South Korea Consortium. Why is South Korea building a reactor there? How come they don't build it in their own country first? It's a silly question, right? They do, I can show you the studies. They do sex ratio studies around these experimental reactors, so to speak. These small modular, not small modular reactors, these tests. These are educational reactors, like 5 megawatts or something. They're designed to teach the university student to be a nuclear operator and the physics behind it. But they do sex ratio studies all around this community, every one of these reactors, and what they see is a big discrepancy in males to female. So there's more males than females, which means less populations. So if you see that in humans, this is what they're seeing, which means it's hemorrhaging radiation. And the only reason you're doing the study is because you know everybody's been poisoned by that reactor. Otherwise, why would you do a sex ratio study? That's the reason you're doing the sex ratio studies, because you know the population is to quantify the population was radiated, poisoned, rather, but through inhalation, through consuming it under clothing and everything else. Thanks to groundbreaking partnership with South Korea. South Korea is the nuclear industry in South Korea, it's only a matter of time before one of their reactors melt down. The South Korea Consortium will aid in the design and licensing of $1 billion project. $1 billion nuclear project. So what they're doing is they're trying to build an infrastructure to support the alleged small modular reactor fantasy as the dominant energy source in the future, right? That's the whole point of this. Because nuclear is stagnated since 1996. You have the same gigawatts now as you did, within 1 or 2 gigawatts that you had in 1996. There's been no nuclear renaissance since 3 Mile Island, for goodness sakes, right? And that's evident in the gigawatt capacity currently and in 1996. But this reactor is also going to enhance the production of another isotope, 177, a vital isotope for treating various cancers. Well, it's not a vital isotope at all. And I'll show you what I mean by that. It's going to spend $10 million on studies that are all going to be pro, by their own alumni, no doubt. Hang on, we'll get there. It's vital to the medical community. The lithium 177 isotope has showed promise. It's not vital, it showed promise. They've used almost every isotope. Now they're creating new ones, so to speak, to try to cure cancer. And the reason they got the cancer in the first place was because of radioactive fallout, or they ate the radioactive food from somewhere from the 400 nuclear plants worldwide. There's now only 360, is it? Nuclear plants worldwide, but they're all surrounded by farms. And so people have been breathing in, it travels, it assimilates into all the food chain worldwide. The isotope has showed promise in treating various cancers, pancreatic, and liver, and thyroid, and prostate. Like putting the reason that the cancer in the thyroid is from the radiation. It used to be 1 in a million in Japan for children. Now it's 13,646 out of 38,000. So it went from 1 in a million to 358,000 in a million post-Fukushima. Of course, liver cancer is typical of the plutonium, or americium or neptunium, and prostate cancers. It's promising. So they used every isotope to treat a cancer. It doesn't work in anybody. And the ones that it did work in were people who didn't have cancer in the first friggin' place, who lived more than 5 years, were typically the people that were misdiagnosed. It's a revolting. The whole industry is just disgustingly revolting. With the FDA recent approval for treatment using that isotope. Well, all the other isotopes didn't work. Why should this one work? You got 80 years of sticking this into people. Before that was the radium. As soon as they created radium, Marie Curie, right? As soon as they come up with the radium, they started trying to poison people with it. And then radium, like this industry is fixated on poisoning you with anthropogenic man-made radiation. Your body doesn't have an autoimmune trigger to defend against it. And this stuff never goes away. Still miserable weather down here. Radium. So when they created radium, they went nuts. So they had this radium spray. This, if you sprayed it now, if the person doesn't die, you'll be charged with attempted murder anyway. Radium spray cleans everything but a guilty conscience. No truer words have ever been spoken. It doesn't clean anything. It irradiates everything. And then none can live there. Radium spray is a liquid cleaner and polisher. It just gives me the friggin' woolies thinking about it. A dust layer, disinfectant, deodorizer. And a sure death to flies, mosquitoes, roaches, bed bugs, fleas, and lice. Will polish and clean furniture. That's why you don't want to buy antiques anymore. Will polish and clean furniture and buggies and automobiles and marble and tile. Like, get a really high quality Geiger counter that can find radium before you buy an old antique furniture or antique cars, for goodness sakes. And get educated on how to use it properly. Will polish and clean furniture, buggies, automobiles, marble, tile, brass, nickel, carpet. Come on, man. Maniacs, eh? Serial killers. Rugs, matting. Just turn everybody into a serial killer. Sell them a bottle of radium spraying. Have at it. Part of the machinery, typewriters, cash registers, and many other things not mentioned. No prescription needed. Just walk in, buy it, go home, and radiate everything. All hail nuclear. This industry should have been just dissolved right there. It shouldn't exist beyond this nightmare. This is a nightmare. That's a nightmare. It didn't stop there, unfortunately. They had radium soap. They had radium toothpaste. They had radium makeup. They had radium makeup, lipstick, and eyeshadow dedicated for children, targeting children. Big, beautiful, bright colors. So the children, Mommy, can I get a nickel so I can go buy some of this? You've probably seen a video of the Radium Girls. They were painting the watches for the pilots that were dropping bombs on other people's children. This is an industry that should never exist. It should never exist. All of these eventually went out of business because people sued them, or their families who died sued them. I mean, this is some strange stuff we're talking about. Making drugs that are imbued with radium, and you fill it up with water, wait till it's radiated, and then drink it till your jaw broke off. Radium chocolate. radium suppositories. They went after you like you can't even you won't. The average person, not the people who comes here regularly, but the average person won't accept and certainly won't be able to appreciate it on their own. They put radiation in every product for women. They went after the women. This is typical of that industry, by the way. Even today, it hates women. It hates females of every species. On top of it, radium heaters. This is one of the craziest thing imaginable. Yeah, you'll get warm, but you'll get sick and die at some point in the near future. Radium razor blades. Radium foot warmers. Man. Can you imagine the health consequences of using all of this stuff? Radium hand cleaner. Honey, use that radium hand cleaner. It smells so good on you. Now go change the kids' diapers. Surplus war stores. There's evil and then there's the nuclear industry. The nuclear industry will never be outdone. There will be no industry can ever be as evil as the nuclear industry. They're the best at every scumbaggery routine we've ever seen. Israel experts warn of fallout, and they show a nuclear weapon going off, as U.S. and Iran nuclear talks advance. First, Iran's not going to give up his nuclear weapons, okay? I see no indication of that over the years. I follow, it's ridiculous how much stuff I actually follow. Oh. I'm hoping in another week I'll start coming around a bit. Israeli security experts, the very last people I'll be trusting, that the regional balance of power could shift permanently, leaving Israel without a strategic edge. It doesn't have that edge anymore. What edge? Like United States, Great Britain, France? Israel can survive for a minute without the G7 and everything else to support it, without United Nations to support it. It has no hope at all. They're not going to build fighter jets. They're not going to build Black Hawk helicopters. They're not capable of it. They're too self-centered, right? It's a failed culture, a failed society. It's a military society. Its whole existence is about military and denial. It lives in complete denial. It has nothing but contempt for everybody else on the planet on top of that. He believes Israel or Iran's uranium enrichment now at 60%. Give your head a shake. There's zero possibility they don't have nuclear weapons. It's zero possibility. And they have something Israel's after using probably 10 nuclear weapons worth of munitions on Gaza. Gaza doesn't even exist. It's completely gone. There's probably 100,000 women and children buried under the rubble we don't even got to yet. They just shoot children every time they see them. According to the doctors, they're shooting them in the head and in the back. It's on purpose. It's like when you're the surgeon in Gaza hospitals, not that there's any left now, they're all gone. All the universities are gone. They looted all the banks. All the shops and businesses have been looted by the Israeli soldiers. All the cash registers, everything else, all the jewelry, all the paintings, everything is looted by the Israelis. So-called soldiers. They never fought a real military, never fought a real navy, never fought a real air force, never fought an armed society. They're the furthest thing from soldiers. They've been acting like terrorists since they existed, for goodness sakes. Completely out of control, generation after generation. Both experts point to Saudi Arabia. I mean, they're probably praying for a nuclear war on top of it. That's probably their fantasy or something. They don't care about the rest of the planet. They don't care about anybody. It's 100% self-centered. And then you got over 1 million orthodoxic headbangers there, the nut jobs. And the other 6 million people, that's what they're working to support, the million headbangers, the orthodoxic idiot machines that only reads Torah and the Talmud. That's all they do. They read 2 books their entire life. They don't do nothing. They don't work. They're a burden on the 6 million people, Israelis that are living there, the Zionists that are living there, suggesting that if Iran goes nuclear, other in the region, including Turkey and Egypt, may follow. If they're smart, they have no choice. Israel's left them no choice but to become nuclear. They have no choice. Israel has made that very clear. If you don't get nuclear, we're going to destroy you like we do to Gaza and everybody else. Public comments invited on proposed Alberta nuclear project. So Alberta wants to get 5 gigawatts, 4,800 megawatts, 5 large nuclear reactors in Alberta. Alberta. Public comments invited on proposed Alberta nuclear project. But a World Nuclear News. Here's another one of these renderings. Why would you look at that when you have geothermal everywhere? Why would you even consider nuclear? It's the death claw of the nuclear industry, right? Nuclear industry is desperate. We see all kinds of these stories. Very highly unlikely it'll ever come to fruition. But there's big money going through the process, right? And they know there's at least $1 billion they can steal right off the bat. Just the early process. Energy Alberta is proposing to build a nuclear power plant on a site covering 1,400 hectares in the Peace River area of northern Alberta. The plant would include 2 to 4 CANDU Monarch reactors. The CANDU reactors are the most pollution-intensive reactors for nuclear. It's a major flawed design, right? The CANDU reactor they got in New Brunswick, Point Leper, legally, because they can't contain it, releases 14,600,000 trillion atoms of tritium-3H just on its own each year. They can't contain it, which is more tritium than all nuclear plants on the planet combined outside of Canada in a single plant. And the CANDU reactor is the end of Canada ultimately, right? Just the pollution from it after it's so much released in Ontario into the Great Lakes from the CANDU reactors, airborne and into the third biggest freshwater aquifer on the entire planet, is absurd. The Impact Assessment Agency of the Canada, IAAC, the Non-Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, the Canadian Non-Nuclear Safety Commission, the Canadian Nuclear Non-Safety Commission, are working together. They're idiots, eh? They're not checks and balances. None of these are. There's no such thing as a checks and balance for the nuclear industry. Like, the nuclear industry doesn't want to get a black eye, a big, obvious black eye. So there's the basic criteria. As long as they don't deviate too far from that, construction companies, everything's good. They can steal whatever you want, as long as you kick back to them. On the integrated assessment to achieve, like, the third biggest donor to Japan the third biggest donor to the International Atomic Energy Agency is Japan. What does that tell us? On the integrated assessment, achieve a goal of 1 project, 1 assessment. In other words, they want to skip the red tape. They want to skip the checks and balances, and just do one little thing here, one little thing there, and use that to quantify not doing it everywhere else. They should normally have now invited indigenous nations and communities, because they love to poison the indigenous population. That's an agenda, like farms are. and the public reviewed the summary of the initial project description and private comments on the proposed project. Well, here's my private comment. Why would you look at this when you have geothermal? And if you build that there, it means you can't build geothermal, you can't build renewables, because the infrastructure don't cooperate with anybody. It's built just to accept nuclear, and it won't accept the renewable industry. So by building it, right, they're saying, well, there will be no renewables here forever, because this industry never goes away. It's a plague forever. Its emissions are forever too. So right away, once they build it, after 14 months after it's running, they're going to take fuel out of the reactor and put it in the pool, and you're going to see heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome, and on and on and on. Skyrocket in that area, and it gets worse every year. Because you're adding more fuel each year, that's more emissions into the environment each year. And there's an endless amount of diseases and illnesses and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries will manifest shortly after. And cancer typically is latent, right? There's all kinds of other health issues will show up first. Our goal is to help build a new and secure and sustainable economy for all of Albertans, utilizing Canada's world-class CANDU nuclear reactor. World-class, like, what are you talking about? The CANDU reactors are the laughing stock of the nuclear industry on top of that. It's the worst technology. When it comes to nuclear, it's the epitome of stupid. Canada's nuclear industry is already a robust economic engine, creating high-paying jobs. Like, there's no nuclear renaissance in Canada. Right, you built all those CANDU reactors at the one time, that was the end of it. And you bankrupted quite a few companies building the last reactor, like provincial companies on top of that. This is not an industry anybody wants anything. Ukraine purchases radiation treatment drug from Israeli. This is made from the placentas of babies. Stem cells, basically, right? I wouldn't buy anything from these people. These people are nuts. 12,000 doses. So they're only going to treat the government of Ukraine. That's what that means. Because Ukraine got a lot more than 12,000 people. And 12,000 doses. So, like, that one dose is not going to be a solution. No. So this is for the government of Ukraine, not for the people. They're using stem cells. They're calling it a drug, but all it is stem cells, right? Ukraine will receive a total of doses sufficient to treat 6,000 people, which is the Ukraine government. It's probably larger than that, obviously. But that's not for the population, clearly. So what's it for? I guarded Britain's nuclear sites. Our security can't cope with new mini reactors. We had a story about that last night. Sometimes he would patrol rural lanes on foot carrying an assault rifle, looking for any terrorists hiding in the countryside. So these people are delusional, eh? The United Kingdom nuclear force, or even cops don't go around with guns. The nuclear force does. They're walking in farmers' fields looking for terrorists hiding out in the fields. These people are delusional monsters on top of that. On other assignments, he would man machine guns mounted on armored ships out to sea. They had special ships built for the nuclear industry to patrol the coastline to make sure that there wasn't any hostile vessels coming their way. Like, if this is not delusional, what actually is? Windscale had, France's La Hague reprocessing site has 500 of these morons walking around the place. 500. How come you don't do that with coal, gas, and oil plants, I wonder? Or you would drive in weapons-laden road convoys, monitoring potential threats from vehicles. So they're out on the ocean looking for terrorists. They're walking in farmers' fields looking for terrorists hiding in the dandelion. They got vehicles driving down the road, looking at all the vehicles with machine guns. Weapons-laden road convoys of them driving around looking for terrorists. So don't go honking at these guys if you see it. These are whack jobs. While serving as an armed officer with the Civil Nuclear Constabulary, United Kingdom is just, it's a prime example of where a government that is insane runs its course till there's nothing but idiots everywhere in the government. So every aspect of how the UK nuclear power station, their radioactive fuel, are protected from terrorists. That's what he saw. We're protected from terrorists. We're walking in the fields. They got ships out there with big guns on them, and we're driving down the roads. There's a terrorist out there. We'll flush them out. The boys will handle it. It's like a partridge hunt, right? With somebody with nothing but toys. He spent years escorting the transport of uranium fuel to and from nuclear disease factories, which would begin plans for months in advance. Nuclear material is most vulnerable when it's in transit, he explains. You really fucking think somebody's going to steal fuel coming from a nuclear plant? Really? Really? Really, you shit for brains? You friggin' burden on society, you idiots. You morons. You're literally morons. You morons that could think that is inconceivable. You morons. You just want to be idiot machines. Look at it. I've never seen anything so ridiculous. The nuclear industry, though. That's what it's all about. Hey, can we make this more stupider looking? Well, let's give them full face hoodies. Small modular reactors are seen as an essential source of green energy. First off, in order for this lead small modular reactor to exist, you're going to need plutonium mixed oxide fuel, enriched uranium. WWE Paul Heyman goes nuclear, and Pat McAfee show goes nuclear. You have to wonder sometimes, does the person who wrote the story just get a donation from the International Atomic Energy Agency to his newspaper, and he's got to find places to use the word nuclear in that's innocuous? Or Israel molds a strike on Iran despite Trump's caution. Well, they're not going to strike Iran, they're going to strike nuclear facilities. Right? Iran and its proxies continue to escalate. What are you talking about? Are you sure Israel's not the one escalating? Israel's the ones that are saying they're going to do the strike, not Iran. Iran's not saying they're going to strike Israel. Israel says they're going to strike Iran. I think that's what the other headline said, wasn't it? Israel molds the strike. Have you heard tell of Iran saying they're going to strike Israel in advance? Have you? I think they should just go ahead and take out Israel's nuclear facilities and get it over with. Let's get the war up and running. There's zero possibility Israel's going to win it, and then we don't have to listen to them bitch and whine and snivel all the time. I mean, they've never fought a real army. That's the only reason they're in Gaza, is because Gaza doesn't have a navy or an army or air force or anything, right? They got no way of fighting back, so Israel's happy to go there. They're not going to go fight Iran, walk into the streets and fight the 8 million soldiers Iran has ready to go. They'll get wiped out right away. They're not going to go limit a strike on Iran's nuclear facilities. Because if you strike Iran's nuclear facility, Iran's going to strike their nuclear facilities 5 times as hard. Right away. No hesitation. They got all their missiles and drones. They'll send 1,000 at it. They'll just bulldoze their way through it until it's gone. And then the whole planet is buried in more radioactive fallout forever. because you got too many idiots out there who've never been checked. The plans reportedly include a range of targeted actions like airstrikes or commando raids. Commando raids, really, at a nuclear site. Intended to delay Iran's nuclear capabilities by several months or more. You attack Iran, Iran's clearly said, you attack our nuclear, we're going to hit you back right away. No hesitation. And I believe him. I don't believe kooky nutjob Pollock to your left there. Pentagon may seek a 12-plus Colombian-class nuclear armed subs because their subs are getting old. They need to replace them all for something they can't use. Don't put, if you do build it, don't put nuclear weapons in there. You're not going to use it. Don't build more nuclear weapons. Just build the shells and put it there, and everybody can pretend that they're special to their children when they get home. You're not going to use it. It's not a deterrent. If someone's stupid enough to pull the trigger, they'll pull the trigger. I'm not going to give a shit about that or this or anything else. And Lord knows there's enough stupid out there. The U.S. Navy Colombian-class nuclear submarine is now in big trouble. Big trouble. You're in big trouble. You're in big trouble, mister. As nuclear threats from China, Russia, this is the same thing. You've got to have a boogeyman, right? Who's the last people China attacked again? Who's the last people Iran attacked again? Who's the last people North Korea attacked again? United Nations attacked, like Japan had captured Japan, hold Japan hostage, or North Korea hostage, Japan did, for 50 years. Then Nagasaki, Hiroshima happened. The League of Nations shows up and does what they call a police action on North Korea, who's been ostracized for 50 years. And now for 74 years they've been ostracized. The United Nations went in there 75 years this year, is it? 75 years ago. And killed millions of civilians, women and children. They burnt down every village, every city, every community, everything with napalm. United Nations did. Police action, right? Millions dead, millions missing, millions in refugee camps, millions unaccounted for, millions of orphans. Police action, right? And now has been ostracized because of the League of Nations, now known as United Nations, which doesn't have any sovereignty over any country, but has a military and everything else. There's 195 militaries. And there's been a curse on humanity since they existed. And they're now taking over everybody's country, whether you like it or not. They have just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of subsidy companies that take over everything that humanity does. Water, tourism, nuclear. You can't do nothing unless you get United Nations permission first, and it gets a giant kickback. In case of nuclear accident, Ukraine will use Israelis' stem cells-based emergency therapies. That's what it is stem cells. Federal election 2025 economists send open letter opposing coalition's nuclear plan. Australia. And he made an interesting statement, subsidizing household clean energy beats nuclear any day. Because I can't remember, it's like 32% of Australia has solar panels on their houses. Australia's a perfect place for renewable energy. It's a perfect place for geothermal. Perfect for solar because it's a continent with an absurd amount of deserts. And desert sand can be used to store energy at 700 degree Fahrenheit temperatures for months. What they call a sand battery. Because you can heat the sand up, the sand will hold the heat. Yeah, well, there you go. The madness. Where's the poll to here? me get rid of this. Go over here. Bring up the poll. Should all nuclear plants surrounded by farms be closed to preserve human life? And I walked you right through that at the beginning of the show. Not all the there's a lot of information. I can do the whole, and I have the whole show just on that topic, right? And that's such an important, incredibly important question that everybody should ask their family or their friends or their loved ones that question. You don't have to extrapolate on everything. You just say, well, because every nuclear power plant is surrounded by farms and they can't contain the radiation from the fuel pools, do you think it's a bad idea? And just leave it at that. Because you'd be surprised what people's minds will do on its own after a few days. Like, they may forget you, right? The rest, who cares? And then the next day, their mind will go, that was a strange question, though. And that night, their brain will go like, gee, maybe I should have asked about that because that's bugging me now. Every nuclear plant is surrounded by farms. I think it's one of the most terrifying things imaginable, besides the fact that I'm censored so much on a program. This program we've been doing for over a decade straight. They took down my other site with 25,800 subscribers that I had for 4 years straight. I never lost a subscriber, never gained one. At 24,800 subscribers for, well, almost 5 years. You sit and wonder why. You don't know by now. It's called censorship, right? Ooh. Raise and retrieval. We haven't got that song played yet. Remember that I was showing you earlier? I was saying we should put duct tape on it so they don't have to keep going back to get their little... It wasn't a raisin, though. It used to be... in November when they done this original fake story that they said they got a chunk out, not a chunk, but a piece out of the reactor was the size of a gram. Just give me 1 second, actually. The size of a gram or a grain of rice. But then the question is, when you got these buildings that are torn apart, I'm sure we'll find a better picture for you. When you got these buildings that were torn apart, how come you couldn't just take a sample out of these, from these buildings? Why do you have to go now and spend $40 million on a contraption that is pointless, is stupid, with a pincher, they don't even call it, they call it a tong. It's supposed to go down, 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 and hopefully, because they can't see anything, when it comes up, hopefully it has a sample of the fuel when the buildings were completely ejected. Well, the idea is to manipulate you into thinking the buildings weren't destroyed. Right? That's the reason they've done it that way. And... why is every nuclear plant surrounded by farms? As far as you can see, why was that so important for them to do that? And they knew it was a terrible idea because they had all these studies showing you how idiotic it is because the farms are going to suck up the radiation. There's millions of these studies out there showing you that is the stupidest thing you can do, yet every nuclear power plant is surrounded by farms as far as you can see. Because it's purposely to poison you. That's who this industry is. It's been doing it its entire legacy. Well, pretty awesome. We made it through another whole show. That's a good sign. We're getting there. Raise and retrieval, and that was that story we were just talking about. I'm going to turn down the volume on my side, make sure it's in high quality. I'll restart it. Make sure it's in high quality. I'm really loving this extra computer that's permanent. Now I don't have to do nothing at the end of the day, and there's always sitting there in the early preambles. It's a big deal for me. I'll get used to it. The novelty just hasn't, thank goodness, hasn't worn off yet. So I got the volume on my side. I'm going to adjust it in real time. And this is from James Lewis's site on YouTube. I don't know if I showed it. Let me go back, make sure it shows it. James has honored me again. And his next video is number 300. Anti-nuclear songs. We'll see everybody on the next show. Hugs for everybody. Get over there and subscribe. Give him a thumbs up. That man has done an amazing amount of things for humanity. We'll see you on the next one. Take care.